Okay, so we're gonna do resumes. And we have some examples. So Neelam was nice enough to share hers from high school. So obviously this is a lot of reading, so she's gonna break it down for you guys. So yeah, take it away.
So I'm going to preface this by saying I think this is an example of what not to do. I would not recommend this at all. This is absurdly long. I think this is like me very much adopting the mindset of like write down virtually everything that you've ever done that could be marginally impressive to anyone. And that I guess like led me to the point where I just wrote down things that definitely didn't need to be there. But what I will say as well, having a resume is nice and definitely helpful going into the Common App process, because I think it kind of just provides yourself with like a summary of like sort of a almost like a menu of things in your sort of like wheelhouse that you can pick from to talk about when it comes to accomplishment related things. However, I would say it's not crucial. If you don't have one, don't stress too much about it. I don't think they really ever asked like specifically for a resume from what I remember. So in that case, like don't worry too much if you don't have one. It's not absolutely necessary. So yeah, I guess like to break this down a little bit, the way that I would structure a resume now, having the experience of just like going through college and job applications, limit a resume to one page. Do not go over one page. That's like a big no-no in like the career world. So this 3-page one is absurd and it's ridiculous. But basically, my process of going about it was just breaking it down into like certain accomplishments. So like school related, Model UN related, because that was a really big thing for me. The geography competitions, as I mentioned before, volunteer work, community service work, and then other extracurriculars. I think in the future, if I were looking at this and if I were an admissions officer and I can make edits, I would basically just condense like the Model UN, geography, academic awards into one, put volunteer, community service, and internships and stuff like that together, and then do like extracurricular at the end, only if you have time, basically. Yeah, I would say try to condense as much as you can. Education is probably like the first and foremost thing that you would have, especially when you're in high school, is like high school, GPA, SAT scores, that kind of thing. And then like some other experiences that are valuable to you. And also because you're in high school, no one's really looking for like an extremely well formatted resume at this point. But if you're interested in having one and like ordering things that are important to you, I would say order it as like it relates to personal importance to you. So like if you had an internship that was really formative to you, like put internships and work experience at the top right after education. If volunteer work is important to you, put volunteer work there and then kind of work down. Yeah, that's just like a little overview of this. Again, I think mine is a perfect example of what not to
do. Okay, awesome. And then I have mine here as well, which mine is also very incorrect. But just to kind of reiterate everything that Neelam just said, of just you want it to be one page, you want it to be short. But I do, Neelam, want you to touch on what you think your most important extracurricular was and kind of us go through the line. So I'm going to move back. And if we'll just tell you guys what our extracurricular was that we feel like really helped with our admissions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for me, the one specific activity that I talked about a lot, and I would actually say, so like I had a Harvard supplement that I wrote my entire like supplement about Model UN. And I think it like helped. So Model UN, I think was like my most important activity in high school, because I think I very much crafted an application that revolved around my love for global affairs and international relations and diplomacy. And it's very much what I wanted to do at the time, slash like still am interested in, even though like my interests are changing. So for that reason, I think Model UN sort of exemplified all the things I really loved doing. So yeah, I would say that was like my personal biggest extracurricular. I also did like sports and volunteer work, but those were not like by any means the focal point of my application.
Awesome sauce. Okay, cool. And then so I would say my biggest tip before, like, this is kind of resume and extracurriculars as a whole, is, and I've said this before, if you came to any other live or see my videos, is to be a pointy student, to kind of not have a ton of random things that you're passionate about, but just one thing that you really hound down on, and then you could showcase how in your supplements and your essay and your resume how you honed down on this one thing. And mine was helping people. So what my examples were was that shy club that I mentioned in my essay, but also I did youth court, if you're aware with that, which is just where any kid that's still a youth that has committed a crime comes to youth court, and we give them their sanctions. So we serve as the lawyers, we serve as the judge, and we just help the student get a second chance before going to adult court. And then also I started a non-for-profit called the Do What We Can Project, where we fundraise to help build houses for the poor in Jamaica. So we'd go to Jamaica every year and build around 2 houses for any poor person or anybody that just didn't have a home, or one family, like the person that lived there was in a wheelchair and he lives on a hill. So he would be in his house for months because he couldn't go down the hill. So we built him a house on flat land. So I kind of just did any type of thing where I could help people and give back. And then just really tried to hound down on that on my application, showcasing that I love helping people. I want to continue helping people. And at your school, I will help people. And I think one thing that you have to take note of is that these schools are trying to admit students who they think are going to be successful so that their name will be tied to you, if that makes sense. So let's say with Addis's t-shirt business, if his business blows up and everybody wants to buy his t-shirts, Columbia is going to be like, Addis went to Columbia. So they want students who are striving towards something. They can tell from their application, they're passionate about this and that they are going to continue being passionate. And they want you so that they can tag their name to your success. So I would suggest just hounding down on your one favorite thing, show examples of how that's your favorite thing, write about that. And that's kind of like my approach with extracurriculars, essay writing, to just be that pointy student. But yeah. Do either of the rest of you want to touch on extracurriculars or resumes, or we can keep moving?
Real quick, it's okay not to have a resume. I didn't submit a resume. You're cool. I think submitting a resume, maybe, I mean, probably asking a college admissions officer would be more helpful, but I think it can only help. But it's okay if you don't. I didn't do it. I really didn't do a lot outside of school. I played basketball and that's about it. So it's okay if you're not doing everything in the world. So
yeah, for me, for my extracurriculars, and also someone asked if they'd like viewed admission file, and I did view my admission file, and I think that my extracurriculars did like the admissions officer brought those up as being important. So in high school, I did martial arts. I competed in Taekwondo like internationally, and so was like a team captain that like went to like world championships and stuff like that. And so I think I don't like talking, like I feel like, but like just to give you like a context of like that's what they talked about in like the admissions profile as like standing out. And so I like that. So and I wrote one of my supplemental essays, or my like optional supplemental Harvard essay about it. And so like someone else asked like what you would suggest writing about. So I would suggest writing about like expanding on an extracurricular that you didn't get to talk about maybe, or just like expanding on something that you're passionate about, or that you spend a lot of time doing in high school. So yeah, I think that was definitely like my main extracurricular that like helped contribute to my application. But I also like I don't think like, obviously like not like, I think whatever you spent your time in high school doing, I think is like valuable, and like don't feel like it has to be like some like huge thing to focus on in that like supplemental process. But yeah, I think that was like one of the main like takeaways, I guess, from my file, of like one of the things that stood out. And then they also talked about letters of rec, which we're gonna like move on to, but I think letters of rec are also very important in the process.
Go ahead, kick us off.
Okay. Yeah. So for letters of rec, they actually like when you get admitted, like sometimes the admissions officer will like send like a little note of like just like welcoming you. And like they were like in the note, it was, I really enjoyed your letter of rec from your taekwondo coach or something like that. So like that clearly like stood out. And then also again, when I read the actual file, that stood out to them. And so I would really, I mean, in high school, like I think uh, like making connect, like really like making connections with professors, and like being like just being able to interact with your professors also is very helpful in college, but I think in high school as well is super important for I mean, I think it helps in learning in like the class process, but then also when you're applying to colleges, to be able to have someone who can vouch for your character and just kind of describe who you are as an individual, because I think that's like another aspect of how to get what your personality is like, um, and what you like are like academically in a classroom setting. So definitely a teacher. So I think I asked for my AP World and AP Psychology professors to write a letter, and then I also had my Taekwondo coach write a letter. And yeah, I would say like in my admissions file, it said that those were like standout points in my application. So I mean, I think that just comes down to like being to like communication with like professors, and it's really like, yeah, I don't really know like too much for advice, but just like working on building relationships and um yeah, working on building relationships in high school is definitely important.
I would touch on that and say to some examples, and I'm going to speak fast because I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So if the four of us can keep our things kind of brief too, but yeah, to ask teachers early, because your favorite teacher is probably somebody else's favorite teacher. So if they have to write around 20 letters of rec and you ask at the beginning of your senior year, then you're probably better off than the students to ask at the end. So you want to ask quick. And then also I have witnessed not for myself, but teachers who have literally copied and pasted and changed a student's name for letter of rec. So you don't want that teacher. You want to make sure that you're actually making some friends out of your teachers who can write about you, or taekwondo like coaches. You want to make sure that the person that's writing about you actually knows you, because admissions officers can see generic letters versus somebody who actually cares about you. It's very easy to see. So yeah, so those are my 2 tips on that, but we can move forward if somebody wants to kick off with that.
Okay, yeah. I guess I can like kick it off, I guess. So basically, I know that a lot of people really panic about exams when it comes to the Common App and just in general. I would say, like from my experience, obviously, like it's just one of the many things that fits into an application alongside, you know, your GPA, a combination of the work that you've done through high school, recommendations, essays. I know that tests are optional this year, I think, just because of COVID. So I personally like can't speak to that and how that changes the application cycle because I didn't experience it. But I can speak to my experience with the exam. So I personally did the SAT because that was very much more like common in New England, which is where I'm from. That's sort of like the standard practice test that most people will work with. And we had the whole like PSAT process. So by the time the SAT came around, I felt comfortable with that format and chose to do that one. I like, if anyone is interested in knowing like test scores, I'm pretty open about it, but I won't share it unless like you're actually curious. Like I feel like just throwing it out there seems a little like weird. But like in my experience, my year was actually interesting, and Manuel might have experienced this as well. I think in our year, like the exam changed about halfway through the year. So it was like the original SAT on the 2400 scale, and then halfway through it changed to the 1600 scale. I personally took the 2400 scale test first, and I was like done. I was happy with it. And then my state, I'm from New Hampshire, they made it mandatory by law for public school students to take the exam, like the new one. And so I got it paid for and took the new one as well. And both of those are around the same score. So I just kind of stuck with that. Yeah. And in terms of like exam, if you have the availability or like the resources to get prep books, that was personally how I studied. And I think that's probably the most affordable way to go about studying if you're willing to sort of be self-disciplined about it. Start early. If you have the resources to use a practice like center or an exam test prep course, you certainly can do that. And I'm sure that might be more available now because of the way that things are switching to a mobile format. But in my experience, I've seen that those are really expensive, and I don't think it's absolutely necessary unless you don't think you're willing to or able to keep yourself accountable on a certain timeline. Or if you just think that someone else's input might be more sharp at kind of pointing out where you might need more practice, that could be useful too. But I personally just used Barron's, Princeton Review, those types of books to prepare.